Okay, Seiko. Why? It's so frustrating sometimes. This is this is definitely one of my favorite brands. Um, as you watch my channel and see my posts, and throughout the years, there's a lot of Seikos. Um, I'll go into this. I'm not gonna get into the story how I got into it, but yeah, um, it's a brand that I wasn't always into, but eventually I did, and it becomes one of my favorites. I just like a lot of the designs and their history, and mainly it's the designs. There's just a lot of cool, iconic stuff. But with that comes some QC issues, and one of them, they don't always have it, but often, of course, the infamous ones are the alignment issues, um, and sometimes maybe even the movements. At least I think so, and that's what this video is about primarily. I mean, I got this SPDC 111. I think that's the reference on this one. This is a Green Willard, and this, the frustrating thing about this is that I liked this when it first came out. It came out with this color and the black version, right? And this is actually the later gen. I guess when these after the whatchamacallit, the ISO rating and standards got updated, they had to include that the a loom pip at the 3 now, or at least a complete set. So that's why they crammed it into the corner here, which is not my ideal thing. I prefer the previous version that didn't have that, like my old SPDC 105. I believe that's what it is, the cappuccino gilt dial. And it's kind of related to this topic too. Yeah, so that didn't have it, but whatever. It's there. It doesn't bug me that much as much as it initially did, and I get over it. The overall design of the watch is cool. Um, but just like my SPDC 105, if I've got the reference right, the cappuccino gilt dial, like a 62 Mas looking watch, lovely watch, beautiful, and everything lined up perfectly and all that on that one. But the movement, the new 6R35, it was running like minus 25 seconds or something, and I took me a while because the case back was really hard to get off, and I finally got somebody to help me open it, and I eventually, after several months, regulated the watch myself, and it actually became one of the most accurate watches I had. It was like plus one or so per day, and yeah, I don't know why I got rid of it. It was a really good watch, and I got it tuned up really well. But the factory for it to be that much off was kind of annoying. And the same came with this one, and I had, once this has been out, or at least initially it came out, what, almost 2 years ago or so? I don't know, time flies. Maybe it's been even three. And I've been holding off on this. They came up with the 62 Moss, and I went with that instead. And I don't know, this was always in the back of my mind, and eventually got it. And then when I finally got it, the alignment issue is really good. There is no issues with the alignment. Everything actually is pretty good on well, you can't goof up on the chapter ring or the index markers, like the little fine small ones on the outside, because it's not a separate piece like some of the Seikos used to be. Some of the models, right, they have a separate chapter ring that's can always be a little bit off, but this one's printed directly on, so it should be fine with the indexes. The only question is the bezel, and this one actually lines up perfectly as far as I'm concerned. Damn good, pretty well. But there's a couple of things, and mainly the main one is the movement. It was God, minus 20 or something. I gotta check my notes, but it was slower than I wanted. So okay, I gotta regulate this thing. And so I got a better case removal tool. It's over here. It's pretty heavy duty, and it works great. I have confidence to open up case backs now. Like even the hardest ones, it's got so much leverage and torque to it. And it's very stable too. It holds the case really good, and so I don't think I ever have to worry about scratching up a case trying to open it up with that machine that I got. But anyways, that's for another day. But so I got in, I regulated it, And what I noticed on the time grapher, which I have back here, um, is that yeah, this thing was pretty erratic. And long story short, I mean, I tried regulating this several times. Even during the process, it's just sometimes the line would stay straight, and then all of a sudden it'll just ramp up, and uh, and I couldn't figure out why. And I adjusted make sure that the beat error was solid. It wasn't like, as zero as possible. And I checked all the positions, and no matter what, especially in the most important position where it's this way, because when it's on your wrist and your hand's most likely going to be in this position. Let me back up a little bit. Right, so like this. This is my glycine. Your hand's mostly operating things, normally doing stuff, active. It's going to be mostly in this position. Not so much like this. This might be the next one. Dial side up because you're going to watch it. Probably like this, or like I guess at a 45, or just like that. Most likely driving, holding something, right? So that's the most important, and that's where, yeah, I mean, I show one reading as I'm adjusting it, and as soon as I put it to whatever, what was it, 12 side down like this, something like that, the readings were just, anyways, yeah, kept trying several times, and basically, I mean, the last time I tried it, I just could not get it. Either I just nudge it and it go up to like plus 40, plus 60 or 70 seconds a day. It's like, what the hell? And it's not magnetized. I definitely demagnetized it, and I checked it on with a thing to check the magnetism and all that. It wasn't that. And this movement is supposed to be one of the more anti-magnetic ones of these entry level, or even if it's upper entry level, the 6R35 movements. And when I tried to regulate it down, it would just all of a sudden shoot down to minus 40, minus 60. I could not fine tune it where it would flatline, or at least give me a much more gradual, you know, rate, like plus 10 or something, even, or 8, or I just couldn't. It's just not working. So I'm going to do the unthinkable. Well, it's not completely unthinkable because I just thought of it, and I'm going to replace the movement in this thing. I mean, what would you do? Question out to you guys. I mean, I've had this for about a couple months. It's probably still in the warranty, even though I messed with it. I don't think they really know, but even before then, I mean, I guess I could have, as soon as I discovered that it was not meeting my, well, it wasn't meeting my standards, but I think it's well within the really broad tolerances for these movements that they have, even for the 6R35. And yeah, I am going to swap out the movement. I'm going to ditch the 6R35. And what am I going to replace it with? Good old 4R35, or the Seiko Instruments equivalent, the NH35. Those are solid. I've never had issues with them. And most of the watches I've had, the 6R35, I have to say, is crap. Sure, it has a 70-hour power reserve, but power reserve has never been on the top of my agenda. I mean, I don't keep my watches off short enough period where I could go back to it and it will matter. It's usually a long break enough so that the power reserve will well if exhausted. Usually it was at 3 days, more or less, right, at best. I would have gone through some other watches by then, so I'll have to reset it. The other thing too is that a lot of times the high power reserve makes no difference to me, because most watches I have that aren't cost, and most of them aren't, they can be very cost performance, but usually I find that they work best while on the wrist. That's why I sleep with my watches, and if I'm keeping it on, except for when I shower, yes, even when I watch it, I try not to get soap scum and anything, and unnecessary heat and all that crap, or even too much hard water on this thing. It's just, I just like to keep it clean. Yeah, that's the only time I take it off. Other than that, it's always on my wrist, and it always tends to be very consistent when it's like that. But as soon as I put it down, and you would think that putting it down in a static position would be better, right? It's not, there's no forces, there's no all this different, movement and everything. It should be very stable, but I find that it can actually go off more when it's just sitting there versus while on the wrist, which is really weird. You would think what the wrist goes to it or really make it kind of go kind of more wacky and offbeat, right? At least that would be my logic in thinking about it that way, but it doesn't. It's quite the opposite from my experience. So that being said, because the movement isn't going to be accurate anyways, I don't really, the power reserve makes no difference anymore because you can come back to it. Sure, it might be running, but if the thing is completely off, I'm still going to need to unscrew, hack the movement, and reset it, and wait for the thing to sync up, and then push it in. I mean, I'm basically going through the motions, so of setting the time again, and I might as well have just give it some extra juice if it hasn't run out of power already. So that's what I'm thinking. So I don't give a crap about the power reserve. 30 or 840 oddish of the NH35 or the 4R35 equivalent, obviously. There's basically the same movement, is plenty. The main thing is that movement is solid. It always works. It seems much more stable and easier to regulate. I think the amplitude is actually higher too. Like you can get a better higher rate, like two high mid or high 200s, or closer to 3 than these. These movements tend to bottom out lower towards 200 and sometimes under. And I don't know. My SPDC 105, the Cappuccino Gilt dial one, that one was, once I regular, was actually very stable and fine. I'll give it that. But out of the box was very disappointing at minus 25 or so. And so I had to fix it. And there's nothing more I can do with this. I think it's one of those cases that I think Spencer Klein mentions that the sloppy work that Seiko does in their movements in the modern watches, they tend to, I believe what he generally says is that they tend to, I think, mostly over oil the movements, and they become really erratic and they just don't, they have deviations and they just don't perform well. And so it requires an overhaul, or at least a good cleaning and then relube to get it actually, done right. By outside party, him or somebody else that knows how to work on Seiko movements and to get it running as it should. And when you get it like that, then the movement is actually really good. But out of the factory, usually it's, yeah, sorry. That's, especially when you're spending about those movements, the watches that have the 6R35s, you're running a roughly more or less $900, $1,000. And that's a lot. I'd rather them use a reliable NH35 or 4R35 in these and get that price halfway back down to where these things should be at, right? $500 or $600. And I'd be fine with that. I don't need the fancy 6R35. Even the 6R15 wasn't even all that, in my opinion. I don't need, it was 50 hours power reserve, but it's more or less the same as the 6R35 as far as I'm aware. It's just they just bumped up the power reserve, and I don't have too many watches with that, if any. Maybe wait, was the Seiko Alpinist that I had? Did that have that in it? The blue one? I don't think it did. Otherwise, I think it would have cost a lot higher than they did go up in price, but not quite as high as like $9,000 or $1,000. Maybe the newest ones, they might have that in them now. But anyways, when I last had my Seiko Alpinist, the blue dial, the Hodinkee special one that everyone got nuts over when they got sold out so super fast, really poor handling. But anyways, so yes, I ordered a NH35 and I'm waiting for that. A couple updated tools to work on it, so I make sure everything goes well. And also, and since this is coming up here on the hour, the hand alignment is actually not that great either, and that's the other thing that bugged me. You can see, I'm trying to get my own reflection in this. is coming up on the hour, and you can see the hour hand is actually just shy of being aligned with, the related index marker, which would be 10 o'clock at this time. So as it goes here, I don't know if it's that obvious to you, but it is like, I would say 3 to 5 minutes behind where it should be perfectly aligned. I mean, we can check this if I'm still running this video at that time, like how many minutes will this look like it's there, like right pointed directly at it, or you can see right now it's just not up there yet. It's still a little bit lagging behind. I mean, if the movement was fun and I could regulate it and it's working, I might have just been fine, because I don't always watch the time exactly at the top of the hour. Alternatively, I could pop it off and just use something to just nudge that hour hand just a little bit more so that it will be aligned. But since I've decided I'm going to replace the movement with a 4R or NH35, I have to pop off the handset besides the dial, right, to get to the dial and get that off of it and put it onto the new movement. I'm going to realign that so that's all perfect as well. So a couple of things, yeah. I mean, the alignment, but definitely the movement. This 6R35 unfortunately is crap. I don't even know if they make a Seiko Instruments equivalent, like a NE35, because I know the NE15 is basically the Seiko Instruments version of the 6R15, and but I didn't check if they have one for the like the 35, so I guess would be NE35. Even if it was, the NE15 already is a bit over $100 just for the movement, and that would be the closest equivalent to this minus the power reserve, right? Let's go at less than 50, but yeah, I did not want to spend that much, and even if they did have a 6R or NE35, if that's what it's called, I'm sure it would be even that much more, a little bit more over the NE15. Because of that, it's a newer movement, higher power reserve, and because I don't generally trust the 6R movement in general, as opposed to the 4Rs, I don't even want to gamble spending over $100 just to get this to perform the way I want it to. So I will just go with a good old NH35. That's the date version only. NH36 would have the day, obviously, just like that 4R36. But yeah, NH35 will be just fine for about $40, and we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try to document this, opening it up, taking everything apart, and putting it back together, and see how it performs afterwards. Am I crazy? I don't know. I really like the look of this watch and everything, and I had so many cool straps that I always have been thinking about pairing with this. That's why I actually got this too, and I just like to continue this. And this is part of my 3 Vietnam era PX watches, like the non-military, military used watches that were the choice for the armed forces back then, that weren't military issued ones. And this like the Willard 6103, right? Was it 6105? 6105. 6105? I think that's. I can't even remember reference, but the original Willard is one. I have a Zodiac Super Seawolf. That's another, and my Lycine Airman is actually another one from that era that was a very popular choice for military back then. Anyway, so that's why I would like to keep one of these to have that trio for me. And I want this running good, and so that does require me to swap out the movement. It'll be more affordable, and if something goes crap wrong with it later down the line, very easy to replace as well. The only thing besides swapping out the dials and the handset onto the new movement, I want to put them on. Okay, I said I was going to align it, is that I believe the date disc in those movements are for crown at the 3. That's just the standard. So I'm not sure if I can still use that date disc as it is. I forgot. It's been a while since I've done my Seiko modding days. I know the day disc inside needed to be swapped out if you had a 4 o'clock, or really it's a 3:45 position. Um, you have to swap out the day disc so because it wouldn't align properly. But I'm curious if that's the same case with a date. I can't remember. It probably is. I mean, if the day is not going to line up properly when it's at the 4 o'clock or 3:45, then and that should be aligned with the date. Then that probably means the day is off, unless it's because the day of the week, the way it's 7 days versus 31, that might make a difference in the way it rotates around and whether it'll line up in that particular spot or not. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I'll probably most likely will have to swap out the date disc or ring that's in this 6R35 into. Let me see something here. See, now it's a little bit closer to being aligned. If you can see, right, it looks more like it's. So yeah, it's approximately 5 minutes off, I think, from being perfectly aligned where it should be, something like that. Suffice to say, I got to fix that besides the movement. So what was I saying? Yeah, so I'll probably have to, before I put back on the dial and hands, okay, I got interrupted. So what I was saying, before I replace back onto the new movement, the dial, handsets and all that, I'll probably have to at least swap out the date this from this movement over to the new one to make sure it aligns with the 4 or 3:45 position, as well as potentially, there's like a plastic holder or ring that's around the movement that the thing fits or sits into, and that I might need to pull off of this and onto the new movement so that make sure it will fit into it properly. I don't know. Sometimes they work just fine with the stock or whatever the plastic. There's a name for that thing. It's not a holder, but it's not exactly a bracket either. But it's this plastic kind of ring that goes around the movement on the outside. Sometimes that works just fine as is. So I may not have to do that. We'll see. I kind of hope I don't have to. I'm trying to avoid disassembling the movements more than I need to. Just trying to get it as straightforward as possible. And that'll be that. So hopefully I'll get this up and running properly and without any more issues with it being so erratic. Yeah, it's either going really fast or it's going too slow. And I can't find a good balance, and it's just way too inconsistent for me to enjoy. Even if I may not wear it quite long enough where it will be that far off, just knowing that it's not where it's supposed to be, compared to my other watches. Most of my other ones are pretty good and well within, uh, 8 or 6 seconds at most off for deviation. Generally even tighter, like 2 or 4. But anyways, so that's my my upcoming project for that. Part should be in by this weekend, so hopefully I'll start on it next week and should be documenting that. And just in case anybody's curious, and yeah, I do not recommend people do it, but since I feel I have enough Seiko modding experience and all that, and I've messed around with the movements myself before, it should be, and all the other pieces that are involved, it shouldn't be too bad. But the main thing is I'm getting the proper tool so I can carefully remove the handset without damaging the dial. That's the main thing right now that probably worries me the most about doing this. But I do have some techniques I know that should be fine to use on this and shouldn't be any issues. But still, that's in the back of my head that I do not want to mar up and fuck up the dial or the handset. But the handsets are not as likely to mess up as the dial. Yeah. Anyways, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.